Hey everyone, Coomber Radio, episode number 301. So we're over the hurdle of the big 300. Hopefully you enjoyed last week. Apologies about the sound quality. A few people reached out to me and said, hey Ben, good content, bad sound quality. I know, I get it. I apologise. Sometimes there's nothing I can do about it. Matt Pritchard was lying in bed with a rusty old computer and we literally did the podcast because, as you could probably tell, he's a bit of a maverick, hence he's done what he's done and built up a career that he has. So honestly, I don't do it on purpose. If the sound quality is a bit poor, then I apologise. But ultimately, I try and do the best that I can every week. And hopefully this week should be good, because me and Tom are going to be talking from our home with good Wi-Fi and good microphones. So here we are. So what are we going to be talking about today? So the government has just released some new anti-obesity guidelines. You probably would have seen the current cancer campaign where they've used that kind of billboard and they've taken out the word so that you can guess that obesity is kind of the word that is potentially the second biggest killer of cancer after cigarettes. Then we've got a few new initiatives that have come out this week. They've literally just landed. So me and Tom thought, hey, why don't we get an objective discussion happening? Because let's look at it. Like, the reality is these are massive changes. We are health and fitness professionals. Some of you listening will be health and fitness professionals, and there's going to be a lot of people asking questions. So this is really, really poignant. Anyway, I should probably invite Tom into the call. Hello, Tom.
Hello. That's the second time in a row you've done that, but it's fine. I'll let you off. I thought these would be really cool topics to talk about. I mean, the obesity campaign, linking it as the second greatest preventable cause of cancer after smoking, that caused a complete ruckus online. There was an awful lot of debate going on, and I thought it was predominantly positive. I thought there was some people from both sides of the argument that took their points of view a little bit too far, but that happens with everything. I do think that this is going to be a pretty interesting topic to watch over the next couple of weeks, though, because I can see quite a few people sort of leaning in, because it's something that can be looked at from quite a few different angles. So I'm hoping to sort of look at a few of them today. And it would be really interesting if some listeners from the podcast could come back to us and give us their feedback and what their thoughts are, because I can see a few people, as I say, seeing this very, very differently.
Yeah, 100%. Like, if you've got some opinion and thought after the show and you want to email the show, email bencoomber@googlemail.com and put in the subject line podcast, and it'll get thrown into the mix. And we'll open up another discussion. Tom, before we get onto the actual intervention stuff that the government has talked about, should we go over the obesity campaign? Like, because we've covered some stuff as part of Body Type Nutrition. If you want to see some comments, then go to the Body Type Nutrition Facebook page. Also, go onto my Facebook page, and I've done a video very similar to the video that I did on the What the Health Netflix video, in kind of looking at just all sides of the argument and just create an objective view. Tom, what did you think about the kind of claims that were thrown out there, and sort of where's the middle ground in the argument objectively from a coach's and an education perspective?
Yeah, so I'm kind of torn on it. When I first saw the campaign, because of the way that I usually think about things and because of my biases, I was fully on board with it is a fact. And if people are offended by facts, it doesn't stop them being facts. And from that, I mean, first of all, I think it's important to say that a lot of the critiques about the campaign were to do with the idea that it's not true that obesity is a cause of cancer, because for that to be the case, it would mean that there's nothing else involved. But we do know that, for example, many people are obese, they don't get cancer. Many people have cancer, they weren't obese. And so what obesity is it's a risk factor, and people were therefore complaining about the use of the word cause. But when we're talking about disease, there's kind of different meanings for the word cause. And the one that Cancer Research UK were using, basically they were saying that in the instances that they were looking at, if obesity wasn't a factor, then cancer would not have occurred. So even when all of these other different factors are taken into account, obesity is the one that sticks out as being the main one. And that's kind of where the claim's coming from. So it's not possible really to complain about the campaign on factual grounds now, but that's not the only thing that we need to consider. So this is kind of where I'm torn. So on one side of the argument, we do know that smoking, for example, is way down in the UK now. People are smoking less year on year, and I think it's very difficult to say that, although other things have happened in the interim, I think it's very difficult to say that that is not, at least in part, because of all of the advertising and the campaigning about the correlation and the link, the causal link between smoking and cancer. Like, more people are aware of the risks, therefore fewer people do it. And therefore, I do think it is very important that we do increase public awareness of the impact that obesity has, not just on how you look in the mirror and all of those other superficial things that people talk about all the time, but everyone knows anyway. And not just necessarily in terms of like cardiovascular risk and stroke, but in terms of this, because one of the big things from that campaign was that Cancer Research UK was saying that it was something like only 15% of people polled realised that obesity and cancer were linked at all. So this is something that people weren't aware of, and I think raising the public consciousness of that fact is only going to be useful. But then on the other side, I don't think that the campaign was necessarily pitched in a manner that would help most people. Now, again, this is where I'm torn, because I don't think anyone's going to be helped by one advert. I don't think you could put one advert on a wall and all of a sudden the country is going to completely change its eating behaviours. So even if you do perfectly raise awareness, and even if it was pitched perfectly in the way that I'm going to suggest in a second, I still don't think it would have worked for many people, because it's one advert and you need to have a whole environment. I mean, how long were we advertising about smoking and cancer before the rate started dropping? But I don't think it was pitched in the most sensitive way. And for me, that could be something that is looked at in later campaigns after the...
So, hang on, Tom, why should it be sensitive? Because
if we want people to change their opinions and we want people to change their actions, regardless of whether, in my opinion, no one should be offended by facts. But my opinions are relevant if a whole bunch of people are, if that makes sense. Like, if I was to be a coach and I wouldn't go to my client and just give them hard facts without context, without any sort of emotion involved, because most people wouldn't respond well to that. Some people will, absolutely some people will. But, for example, if you just walked into McDonald's and just pointed at someone and go, you're going to have cardiovascular disease, they're still going to eat their burger. And I don't think that this advertising campaign was too dissimilar to that. I do think that more needs to be done on a person-to-person basis. And I think more, at the end of the day, pointing out that obesity is linked to poor health doesn't give people actionable steps to take to fix it.
No, and I agree with you. I think the thing that I'm concerned about here in sort of almost like debating your point of view is that you got to think about cancer. The cancer campaign was about saying, hey, hang on, let's have a massive conversation here. And credit to the campaign, a massive conversation has started. We're now talking about it on this show, for example. So in one side of the argument, it's already achieved that aim. When you're looking at something like this, sometimes do you not feel, and you got to take aside the other context that you talked about in like, coaching, I wouldn't do this in coaching. I wouldn't either, unless I felt that the individual needed an intervention. Yeah. Now, is there an argument to say that at this level, we literally need to punch the UK in the middle of the eyes, to stand back, kind of be a bit dazed, and then be like, right, okay, let's think about this objectively. There's always going to be a group of people that become reactive to the facts because they don't see the bigger picture. They can't be objective about it. And in a campaign like this, did it actually achieve its purpose by creating just such a massive UK-wide conversation about something that everyone should be concerned about, because it is our health, well-being and disease risk that we're talking about?
Well, I hope so, because this is why I'm torn. I mean, at the end of the day, I come very much from the facts don't care about your feelings school of thinking about things. And I do think that, yes, I mean, first of all, I will say yes, fat shaming is a bad thing. Fat shaming doesn't work and it doesn't help anyone, so therefore it doesn't serve a purpose. But I think the people calling this out as fat shaming they've misplaced their views, I think, because I don't think it came across as that at all, like not in the slightest. My only reservations are that I've seen conversation online and a lot of it seems to be people aren't taking the message in a kind manner. Now, I don't know whether that's just because of the people that I follow online, but I think the conversation needs to happen, and I do think that people need to accept facts for what they are. I just think it'll be interesting to see in the next few months the direction in which the conversation goes, because I would hope, and I think it may be the case that it does go in the right direction, and I really hope it does. I just think it'll be interesting to watch, because there is the possibility that the tone wasn't correct. I don't think it was, but I've seen a lot of people think that I've seen a lot of people think that it was, and therefore we need to think, yeah, what I think about this campaign doesn't really matter because it's not me that it's talking about. So yeah, I just think it's going to be interesting to see.
If I stand back and be objective, building on my last point, I saw a really interesting, I can't remember where I saw it, but basically a comedian had posted up that she was appalled by the campaign and that it was fat shaming and all the rest of it. And the comedian had taken a photo of herself, and I don't know if this is the right image, but the comedian looked very, very, very overweight, like, you know, almost like twice the normal body weight of an individual of that size. And while the campaign is not directing, you know, and pointing the finger, in my opinion, at her saying, you know, we're fat shaming you, this is bad. But the reality is, from a broad health perspective, disease risk, looking at overall well-being, and looking at quality of life, obesity is not positive. So if we're pointing the finger at obesity being a problem for anyone and everyone, we can't deny the fact that it is a problem. And we're not talking about being overweight. We know people can be really healthy being, you know, just like, you know, casual 2-3 stone overweight. But as soon as we start getting 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 stone overweight, that's putting so much stress on joints, organs, everything. And Definitely. to stand there and go, oh, this campaign's really bad, you're skipping around the fact that you're not in a good state of health, and that's not going to be good to your later years of life. You might be fine till you're like 40, 50 or whatever, but it is going to overcomplicate your health as a whole as you start to age, and the systems that have a lot of stress on them are not going to be able to work optimally. No,
I agree. I mean, a lot of the complaints, especially, I mean, the complaint, I can't remember the girl's name, but the comedian that did put those comments out was on our Twitter. She's a big proponent of the healthy at any size movement. And for me, the healthy at any size movement is a significant bastardization of what was initially a good idea, in that it was initially pitched to be, look, you don't have to be, well, it's what you just said. You can be a casual 2-3 stone overweight and be perfectly healthy, provided you're active, provided you eat a reasonably balanced diet. Yes, you overeat, but you're not going to suffer any consequences because you're a healthy person. And I think that people have taken that into what's known as now fat acceptance, where it's fundamentally based around denying the fact that severe obesity is not good for health, based upon the idea that some obese people aren't unhealthy now. And here we're going back to the smoking example, where it's like some people will smoke for 50 years and never have any problems, but that doesn't mean that smoking is not a bad thing to do. And there's also sort of false moralizing of the argument, in that nobody is saying that you are a morally bad person for being obese. And as soon as people start to sort of take the argument in that light, that is probably where the offence comes from. Because if someone told me that I was morally wrong for doing something that I was doing, unless it was, you know what I mean, then yeah, I'd be annoyed by that. I'd be offended by it. But nobody is saying that you don't have the right to do what you want to do. You have the right to be 500 pounds if you want to be. the problem comes in when you then try to promote that as a healthy lifestyle, or when you start to complain about government campaigns that are advocating the idea that maybe it isn't.
I think this is where we do need to look at, or have an idea of correlative, causative data, because the line at which we say something is unhealthy with a person's body is hugely blurred. And we don't really know at what point, like if I put on a stone, 2 stone, 3 stone, 4 stone, we don't actually know that point where for me, that's going to start to become unhealthy and put undue stress on my body. Is that line overweight, obese, super obese? We don't know. So we have to be realistic and exercise a certain amount of common sense to say, come on, a little bit, it's not going to be a problem. When we get to a lot, okay, we're starting to see increased blood pressure, increased stress on the joints. If we did a couple of tests, we're starting to see some elevated markers. That's when actually legitimate we could say you're not in a good place of health. And for me, there's certain movements, especially around like healthy at any size, there's certain movements where people are just creating a framework to justify and make themselves feel better. And that's not a bad thing. Everyone deserves to feel great every day, but make themselves feel better. But what is actually an unhealthy place to be?
Definitely. A big thing, just what you said there on the end, it's dissociating yourself from your body, in that you are a human being, you've got a personality, you've got a mind, you've got all of this potential to do whatever, but also you're carrying around this meat sack that changes in state at various times. People will gain and lose weight throughout the year. People might gain a whole bunch of weight at some point and then lose it at another point. And as soon as people start identifying as the amount of fat that they carry with them, that's where problems come in. So the whole idea way back when of like the sort of body positivity movement was to not identify as your body. You are a person and you have a body, and you can then love yourself while understanding that that body could be improved in ways that would make your life better, that would make your health improve. But what the Healthy at Any Size movement's done is kind of taken the positivity out of that message and said, no, you are that obese person, you are that obese body, and you should be proud of it. And they're two very different messages. Both of them are preaching that you should be happy with yourself, but they're both preaching it from a very different angle. And I think whereas the former was based upon loving your body in a sense of doing the best for it over the long term, the latter is kind of focused on loving your body, and people who don't love your body are at fault. People have no right to judge you for the way that you look. And pointing out that obesity is connected to various health conditions is not judging a person, it's judging obesity. And if a person is in a state of obesity, it would be the same as if I was to have, if I was to have some disease, some condition. You can point and say that that condition's a bad thing without offending me, because you're pointing at the condition that I have. And I know that it's not a good thing. I don't want to have it. And obesity should be viewed, in my opinion, in the same way.
I think there is a huge lack of people being able to be objective in a lot of environments. Like, we live in an information age now where things are coming at us all the time, and we're reacting based on our belief system, our morals, our understanding of the situation. And so many people, they read something and they just react. Well, rather than reacting, stand back and say, okay, let's actually look at this. Like, I wrote a blog last week for personal trainers, and the blog was titled "Stop Getting Emotional About Your Business." And, we talk about it in a business sense. If you write an email to a customer service department of a company, the company doesn't get all emotional and reactive about that problem, because that would be, we would view that as bad customer service. So that company would then go, okay, let's stand back, let's review this. Actually, there's a flaw in our product. We're not going to get emotional about it. We're going to stand back. We're going to be objective and say, right, how do we fix this problem? How do we improve our product or service as a business? And then we go and communicate that to our customers and appease the problem that might be there. But we don't do that as people. Like, if we looked at customer service in our brain, are we giving ourselves good customer service and then giving that information in a positive way to other people? If we just react emotionally based on our belief system, our values, and kind of just what we hold as fact, we're not doing ourselves and the world the best possible service, because we just haven't broadened our perspective on all the different arguments here. You know, some people have honed in on a couple of key points on this obesity campaign, but if we stand back like me and Tom are trying to do now, actually the actual core message of hitting someone between the eyes here is probably going to lead to more positivity than negativity.
Definitely. I mean, sure, there's going to be some people who will take it the wrong way and it'll make them feel bad about themselves, but ultimately I don't think any message could avoid that. I think it would be very difficult to put out anything that says something is not a good idea and you won't offend somebody, you won't upset somebody. I just think it's something that, as long as it's minimised, it's something we just kind of have to deal with.
Yeah, 100%.
So,
everyone.
Should we look at these guidelines?
Yeah, actually, before we do that, I'm actually going to read out an email, because on one of our last podcasts we talked about glute training, and for me there was a little bit of a reaction from the glute conversation that me and Tom had. And again, I feel that people weren't fully objective about the topic that we were talking about. Now, if you've listened to the show before, I'd like you to think that me and Tom and the show in general has a very balanced view of health and performance and well-being and mindset. And we don't ever point the finger. We might have, strength in our conviction about some topics, but it's very balanced in my view. And the conversation around glute training and doing some of these smaller exercises got a few comments. One of the comments on Twitter, someone sort of said that they thought our perspective was a little bit ridiculous, that these exercises didn't have value and all that kind of stuff, and at no point did we say that those exercises didn't have any value. Anyway, I'm going to read this email. Hey, Ben and Tom. I first started listening to your podcast after a friend recommended it a couple of years ago, and I've loved it ever since. It's a regular fixture on my dog walks, and I often share them with friends. I've emailed you before when I was in touch last year about potentially talking at one of your wellbeing fitness retreats I was running. Your Q&A episodes are some of my favourite, and I love hearing your insight. I've just been listening to your latest one about female muscle growth and will definitely be incorporating the hypertrophy and strength cycle that you recommended during that conversation. I'm not big on sharing my personal fitness journey on social media. I've tried occasionally and mostly just lose interest, but can relate to the constant bombardment of glute girls you referred to on Instagram. There's no way those butts were built with bands alone, and not weighted exercise won't give you buns of steel, but there is a time and place for them. With a huge female following I don't doubt you have, I'd hate for their place within a mobility warm-up and stabilising role to be demonised. When I was starting out with a lack of knowledge and hearing the message that squats and deadlifts are what you need to do, I'd do a bit of warm-up, but fundamentally I'd just dive in for sure. Sure, I had a great deadlift for my relative experience, but what I didn't know was that most of the work was driven by every other muscle except my glutes, leading to eventual crippling lower back pain and horrendous muscular imbalances. Yes, the big lifts definitely can work, but the sheer lack of awareness I see in the gym of people loading up the weights and then stressing their bodies in ways it shouldn't move honestly terrifies me. I know, because I did it too. I was that person. Since then, I've self-educated a lot, as well as shifting a whole career course from being an engineer into well-being and body movement. I'm now a yoga teacher and sports massage therapist, but I'm also training as a PT, as I hope to redefine my physical activity for other people. I'm a huge advocate of not just moving more, but moving better. Leg days for me are something very different to what they used to be. I don't really squat now, not because I don't think it works, but it's just not what's right for my body. Sure, I can smash a load of plates on the bar, but all I'm really working is my ego. My strength probably won't improve unless I'm lucky I'll end up with some sort of niggle or injury. A good part of my workout session now involves some of those uncomfortable to look at movements and little weights to ensure I'm doing sufficient mobility and glute activation work so that when I do come to a lift a decent amount of weight, the right muscles are kicking in the right order. Sure, I probably look like a bit of a knob doing them, and it may well leave some awkward red faces around, but I do believe those bands should be in everyone's toolkit. The general lack of awareness we have for our own bodies is leading to an injury epidemic, and those kinds of exercises help prevent issues before they take hold. Heavy weights can often disguise what is really going on until it's too late and something tears, pops, or generally falls apart. I definitely won't be filming myself doing them anytime soon, and I appreciate they work well as an advertising tool for whatever latest brand is being plugged on Instagram. But I'd love to hear some more from you guys around how those kind of exercises can have a place within a full and balanced program, so people don't end up feeling like they should only be reaching for the iron all the time, or feel embarrassed or like they're wasting time doing mobility work at all. I hope you don't think I'm emailing to be a dick, as that's definitely not my intention at all. I really respect the thoughts and opinions of you both, and I'm looking forward to doing the Foundation Academy soon, as I've wrapped up my personal training qualification. I just wanted to share some insight from the other side, and that was from Courtney. I 100% agree with you, Courtney, 100%. And I think some of the reaction for some individuals on that conversation was, again, not being objective. I kind of brought up the topic of glute training in the gym and some of the exercises people do as a bit of a tongue-in-cheek exercise, because it was around the conversation of people fundamentally moving well and being strong and going through training cycles. Now, I just talked about personal experience of having catched the eye of people, and 100%, like, I'll still stand by that comment. I've walked past people in the gym and felt a little bit awkward when I've gone, oh God, yeah, sorry, I wasn't like looking there, but kind of felt like, Anyway, you get what I'm saying. There is 100% a place for every exercise in the world. I go into the gym and I do glute bridges, I use bands, I use tiny little weights, I do loads of light exercise stuff that activates, stuff that strengthens, small accessory exercises. And I think the key thing that Tom brought up is that, while all of these exercises have value, we never want to take away from the core movements of the body, making sure the body is strong and efficient in every way. So while my comment might have been taken the wrong way slightly by being a bit tongue-in-cheek, the core objective of the conversation was to use the right things at the right time and not to kind of fall in the trap of, seeing some of these little tiddly exercises on Instagram and thinking, oh, that's what makes up a lower body training program. Because I kid you not, I see it all the time in my gym. People are in the gym for ages just doing little exercise of this, little exercise of that, tiny little exercise of this, where you could have done 5, 6, 8, 10 sets of squats, walking lunges, then a little bit of band movement, that kind of stuff. And the impact on the lower body would have been much bigger and had much better return. Now, obviously, I don't know that person's situation and what they're doing, but I've got a pretty good radar for this stuff. I've been working in fitness for 11 years, and there's an awful lot of young girls in my gym doing a lot of what for me feels like a cheeky Instagram lower body workout. And I could be wrong, but I think my fitness intuition is pretty decent.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, what you said there was really good. Every exercise has a purpose. Like, every single exercise you can think of, I can't really think of many exceptions, will meet a goal at some point. Someone will need to do that for some reason. I think that the main problem we're trying to get across is, as you say, though, the single biggest driver of progress in terms of resistance training is overload. So if you're doing an exercise that you can't really overload, then that should purely be kept for, like Courtney mentioned, like mobility movements. If you need to do some extra mobility movements so that you can move well, if you feel like you need to do some activation movements so that you can feel certain muscles working, then that's the perfect place to use those. It's as you said, Ben. If that makes up the entirety of your workout, I would question the usefulness of that actual training program, because there's going to be something there. There's going to be a lot of things there that you're not going to be able to overload. There's going to be a lot of things with which you're not going to be able to progress. Mm-hmm. And therefore, if progression in terms of muscle growth and all of that is your goal, then you won't achieve it doing only those exercises. If you have other goals, then you might, but it's as you say, we were speaking in broad strokes.
So, Courtney, thank you very much for your email, and as does anyone else. Like, if anyone else sort of feels that they disagrees with the point of view on the podcast or anything like that, always write in, always comment. But what we'd like you to do is just stand back and be objective about what the core point of our message was. And I'm not standing here saying I'm always right. That's not the point. It's just I felt that sometimes people are not standing back and going, actually, let me consider where these guys are coming from and why. And I'll always be the first to apologise if I've kind of stepped out of line or said something that hasn't considered that person's context, because that's really important. Anyway, Tom, let's talk about the government stuff and continue the conversation about the new initiatives that are in place.
Yeah, so this morning, a whole bunch of news stories broke. I couldn't find out whether these guidelines came out today or yesterday, but Public Health England has produced its 1U programme, which I quite like as a name. It's quite good to sort of use those just simple words to point out that you've got one body, you've got one chance, and it's worth looking after it. So these guidelines come in like two arms, and I think we should probably talk about them separately because each one has different talking points that are worth sort of going into. So the first one is its 400, 600, 600 plan. So the idea is you'd have a 400 calorie breakfast, 600 calorie lunch, and a 600 calorie dinner. And then PHE are basically expecting you to make up the rest of your calorie allowance, which if we go by the UK guidelines is 2,000 calories for a woman, 2,500 for a man. So they're expecting you to make up those 400 to 900 calories with snacks and drinks. And I think there's quite a lot of things that can be said about that. Do you want to dive in before I go on a tirade?
Yeah, well, I think my key thing is awareness for the first, key thing is awareness is important. Like, okay, this is what I'm putting in my mouth. When I was kind of reading this and you were talking a little bit earlier, I scribbled some notes on, I feel that there's three core groups of people in society that think about food in a certain way. And don't get me wrong, this is a massive generalisation. There's a group of people, let's just call them group one, that have no care about what they eat. They eat what they want, they don't really consider it, they feel that they function okay, they're just not that in tune with their body and their health. This information they're going to look at and think, meh, and just carry on with life until they get that trigger or that moment that inspires them to learn about this kind of stuff. Then there's this section of the population that I would call them, they're all the constant yo-yo dieters. They're the people that are dieting 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. They've done a bit of Weight Watchers, they've done a bit of Slimming World, they've done another diet, and they will pay considerable attention to this information. And they'll look at it and they'll think, right, okay, that's good information, I'm going to adopt that. And really, it doesn't change how they behave around food because it's really the same approach as someone like Weight Watchers or all the rest of it, because it's just another mechanism to look at controlling food when you're being good. And that's a key distinction that I think is important here. So the general population, Monday to Friday, will have a pattern. These people might eat 400 calories for breakfast, 600 for lunch, 600 for dinner, and maybe have like a piece of fruit in the afternoon, a chocolate bar or whatever. And let's just say they eat 2,000 calories and everything is cool. That's when they're being routine, habitual, and good. Then when they get to the weekend and everything changes, and they quote unquote struggle between being good and wanting to be bad or having whatever they want, this is when the information gets thrown out of the window anyway, because they're not in their normal routine, they're not in their habitat. So they end up going out, eating food, whatever, because they don't have this framework. And at some point, this framework needs to really teach people that, okay, we've got this 400, 600, 600 thing, but what happens at the weekend? What do we do? How do we go out and enjoy food? How do we enjoy some alcohol? And actually, unless that campaign sort of rears up the back of this 400, 600, 600 campaign, I'm not sure anything will change with that group of the population in the middle, the 9 to 5 dieters. And then there's the people that are in the know. There's the people that, like maybe you and me and Tom are in gyms and we're like, oh, this is pretty cool. I wonder how it will affect the population. It probably won't affect us. The thing that will probably help us and people that are concerned about food is that we will be able to walk into a cafe or a restaurant and there'll literally probably be a meal up on the wall that's 600 calories. And there's maybe like 5, 6, 7 options. And we can go in and go, yeah, awesome, 600 calorie meal, bosh, 40 grams of protein in it, brilliant. And actually it helps us quickly on the move manage our nutrition, which is always a good thing. So I think it's a good initiative in principle, but it has to have the surrounding education. It's like the previous conversation we've just had on the obesity and cancer campaign. Like, it's a punch between the eyes. Awesome. People have sat up and listened. Is it going to have the education around it to actually make change?
Yeah, that's really good. I actually noted that down myself. So it's basically, these guidelines will not affect the people who most need them, because at the end of the day, we've had the Eat Well guide for God knows how long. We had the Eat Well plate for years. We had the Eat Well guide come in, I think it was about 4 or 5 years ago. I could be wrong on that. But it wasn't long ago anyway. And those calorie recommendations, so 2,000, 2,500, they've been there ever since I've known anything about nutrition. I think we had them on the wall at school. And yet obesity is getting worse. So the overwhelming fact, unfortunately, is that the blanket recommendations and the one-size-fits-all top-down government guidelines, no one sticks to them. So it's, as you say, that first group that you mentioned, the people that don't pay attention to their food, they're the people who need as much help as possible in order to get their eating in line and to sort of improve their health. And yet they're the people that will not pay attention to this. So, as you say, while it is a really good campaign in principle, it's nice to see that the government are actually focusing on calories for a change, as opposed to demonising sugar or fat or something that's sort of ancillary to the major issue. I do think that, unfortunately, it will probably fall flat. There's an interesting quote as well from Graham McGregor, who's Professor of Cardiovascular Medicine at Queen Mary University of London and the chairman of the Action on Sugar people. So Action on Sugar was this idea we were going to reduce sugar content in the top, I think it was the top 9 foods that contribute sugar to children's diets by 2020. So he was the chairman of that. And he's put here, there is a large danger that this awareness campaign could simply be used as a marketing tool by food retailers and the out-of-home sector to sell more products, which I do think is a big concern. I mean, as you mentioned there, it'll be really useful for people like us who count our calories and stuff anyway, or at least pay some attention to them. Because we can go into Subway and say, oh, I'll have that 600 calorie sandwich because I know it's going to fit my macros. But we didn't need that help anyway, really. It's a nice convenience thing, but we didn't need that help. But really all it's going to potentially do is the group that you mentioned second, so the people who will stick to these kind of diets when they're being good, they will just now be more tempted to go into Subway, or they'll be more tempted to go into Greg's because there's 600 calorie options that fit their diet, as opposed to cooking meals from home, because now they've got that incentive to eat food when they're out. I read a really interesting paper the other day, actually, that was on a completely different topic. But what it was talking about was calorie tracking apps. And what they found was there's, within the group of people that they surveyed who'd used MyFitnessPal, those people were, since using MyFitnessPal, more likely to eat packaged goods because they were easily scanned into a barcode scanner. So people were then discouraged from cooking food at home because they could just, oh, well, I know that I need 700 calories. If I scan these 2 things, then there's my food settled. So it has got that potential to sort of negatively nudge people towards suboptimal food choices in terms of long-term health if they're eating these things all the time. So it's a good idea in principle, but it suffers from the same problems as all blanket recommendations that come from sort of government bodies, especially Public Health England, and that is that no government campaign of this nature can be complete. And from what we see in sort of research surrounding dietary interventions is that personalised dietary interventions are the only ones that work. And so it seems to me that this is a good idea in principle, but it's going to fall on flat ears. And if anything, it could potentially be a waste of funds.
So this is where, in potentially the obesity campaign that we talked about, could be the slap in between the eyes that group 1 people need to go, shit, actually, I need to look at my health. And then they transition into almost group number 2 and take up these recommendations. And hopefully they move into group number 3. And this is why I kind of agree with a lot of the initial sentiment with the obesity campaign, is that my purpose right now on this podcast is to hit people between the eyes, and this is why we've talked about mindset and all sorts of stuff, to say, hey, this is what you could have if you implemented this information. Like when people ask me about my work these days, I describe myself as almost a facilitator of change. I want to just inspire people to change. Yes, I can teach you about food and all that kind of stuff. That's actually the easy stuff, but inspiring someone, that's actually the hard thing. So if we can hit people between the eyes and get them to facilitate that change, then actually that's cool. And then if we've got this core recommendation of 400, 600, 600, and then around that is this kind of one life message of like, hey, what are you doing with your health? What are you doing with your body and mind? Actually, maybe there's huge potential here.
Potentially. It would be very nice for this to be, it would be very nice for this to be like the stimulus that does sort of instigate change, because as I said about smoking, it wasn't one campaign that solved smoking, it was numerous campaigns over time, and this is only adding noise in the right direction to the noise. We've just got to kind of hope that, as you say, if this does convert the group 1 to group 2, and then those group 2 eventually either find a personalised manner of eating, then that would be great. My pessimistic side says that might be wishful thinking, but I can only hope that you're right and I'm wrong, I guess. So that was the first arm anyway. The second arm is basically some legislation that sort of mirrors the Action on Sugar. So as I mentioned, Action on Sugar, from 2015 to 2020, the top 9 foods had to reduce the amount of sugar in their product by 20%. And what that resulted in, for the most part, was smaller portions. So this is why Mars bars are smaller. This is why cream eggs are smaller, because a product has to have less sugar in it. And so the second arm of this one kind of mirrors that with savoury foods. So you've got to reduce, manufacturers are being urged to reduce the amount of calories in a few different things. So it's like savoury biscuits, crisps, pizzas, meat products and ready meals, all that sort of stuff, by 20% by 2024. But again, this is where pessimist Tom says that what I would imagine is going to happen there is that, well, they've been given 3 options. They can either make smaller products, they can make products from a different recipe, or they can make new products that have fewer calories and encourage customers to buy them instead. So ideally, the third one would happen, because if we've got all of these awareness campaigns and then an increased availability of diet products, then people will probably adopt them. There's an interesting thing that in 2016, Pepsi Max sales absolutely skyrocketed and regular Pepsi sales bottomed out. So because of the increased awareness of the problems with drinking loads of sugar all the time, when that was combined with sort of a free market option where people were just given the choice, you can have the sugary thing that you know isn't great, or you can have this newly improved sugar-free version just as good. And people have started to opt for the sugar-free thing. It's the same as what we did see with smoking when vaping became really popular. That was the catalyst for the change. It's these free market extra options for people in combination with education, rather than forcing people to do stuff. So if the third option is adopted and companies start to produce lower calorie crisps and lower calorie biscuits and lower calorie pizzas and all of this stuff, then potentially it might help. But pessimist Tom says those things were already there. It's not difficult to go into Tesco's and find a lower fat version or a lower calorie version of the thing that you would normally eat. And so I just see this as manufacturers will start making smaller portions. And the problem with that is people will just eat more things. And so I don't think that is as good as the first recommendation, which I do think does have some positive things behind it. So that was what I had noted down anyway. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think the government has obviously put pressure, and rightly so, on manufacturers to make their products, lower calorie, and we can't deny the fact that that is a beneficial thing. But it doesn't change the fact that people eat those foods for certain reasons, whether it's pleasure, habit, can't be bothered. Like, it doesn't solve any of those problems. So, like, for example, if I take a Subway sandwich and I choose a low-fat option compared to a normal option, while that's great in principle, I have to consider if something's just been taken away. So let's just say they take out the cheese, and that cheese is going to help maybe fill me up a bit, actually provide a more enjoyable experience of eating that food product, give me just a general nice feeling of eating that food. It brings together the sandwich. Actually, could that normal sandwich have lasted me 4 or 5 hours, whereas now the low-fat sandwich has only lasted me 2 or 3, 3.5 hours, and actually I need a snack to tie me over, and actually it's not achieved anything because the original food was more fit for purpose. So, we don't eat sugar, for example. We eat foods that contain sugar as a whole. So we have to consider what the impact is of eating these actual foods, of these actual meal combinations, and what we should be eating as humans. Like, we shouldn't really be eating that much junk food. And if we start to bring all the calories down and make them really diet friendly, we're almost like justifying their inclusion in a diet on a mass scale. I'm not saying on a here and there scale. I'm talking about every day. So really, does that change people's want to change their health and actually eat lots of real healthy food? Like, for example, I'd be interested to actually see someone like Jamie Oliver's comments on these campaigns, a real food advocate of helping people include healthy food and make it taste amazing. That's what we need to be moving towards. So yes, it helps, but like you said, pessimist Tom, does it really solve the problem?
No. What you pointed out there was good as well, because you sort of mentioned it, but then didn't come back. It's like, if someone's eating ice cream because they're sad, or someone's eating biscuits because they're bored, I don't think that reducing the calories in those specific foods is going to actually make much difference. It needs to be a case that people find alternative means of dealing with their emotions. In that example, there are a million other reasons why people eat foods. But it does come down to what I mentioned before with like personalized nutrition advice. And this is where I hope, sort of going off on a bit of a tangent, this is where I hope that the nutrition and the fitness industry does start to become a little bit more sort of regulated in order that we can get some credibility. I think it would be fantastic if the UK can continue what it's starting to do with recommending exercise. So GPs are now referring people to exercise professionals. I think it would be fantastic for nutritionists to start being viewed as a legitimate force that can improve public health, because at the end of the day, if we know that individualized nutrition programming and individualized nutrition coaching, be that for general health or be that for whatever goal you have, individualized approaches to nutrition are the ones that work, and we need someone to facilitate that. So I think it would be nice to think that these kinds of interventions are going to make a difference. If they do, then brilliant. But I think it would be better to spend energy on looking at ways of facilitating a more personalized approach.
Yeah. Well, I think we've covered that nicely, Tom. Hopefully people have had some value out of that. I do, at no point do we want to discourage the top-level interventions that governments are trying to make or kind of demonise them. We're obviously here to give, like, an opinion, an objective viewpoint. Obviously, we as healthcare practitioners need to actually support these initiatives because as a whole, they're positive. We're still making noise about change. So what personal trainers and fitness coaches have done in the past is just gone, oh, well, the Eat Well plate's a load of shit, or this recommendation's a load of shit. It's not a load of shit. It could be better. Sure, there's loads of things that could be better, but it's still a positive movement. And if we actually keep, as an industry, resisting all these positive steps the government creates, we make more confusion for the general population. Oh, is my personal trainer right? Is the government right? Oh, I'm so confused. I don't care anymore, I'm back to group number 1. Whereas before someone was in group number 2 and we're trying to move them over to group number 3 of these populations that I talked about. So I don't want people listening to this to go away and demonise it and resist it. Again, be objective. Help people take this information on board, but refine it. Like if you're a personal trainer and you think, you know what, off the back of listening to this, I'm going to make a Facebook or social media post to help explain this to my followers. Support the movement, but then give your opinion around it. Be objective. Say, this is a great idea, but be wary of this, be wary of that. That is a much more positive energy that we can start to put out to the world that is more unified. So I, for one, am not going to discredit what the government's doing. I'm going to support it. Am I going to help people refine it? 100%. But ultimately, we've all got to be moving in the right direction. Otherwise, we just create confusion. If I talk to most people that are struggling with their diet, the number one thing people say is, I'm confused. I don't know what's right. I don't know whether carbs are good or bad or protein's going to give me cancer. People are fucking confused. So help people out without resisting. Start just expanding and supporting the global message that's been trying to put out.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to sort of chat to you about this on a podcast. I think it would have been easy for us to do a few Facebook posts or something, but I don't think you could get the nuance that you can get in a more sort of long form medium. I think these guidelines and stuff, as you say, they're the kind of thing where, I mean, for the most part, it's the kind of thing where it is positive, provided that it's contextualized in the right manner. And yeah, as you said, the best thing we can do is to take people who ask us about this, and rather than going, nah, shit, just go, yeah, it's not a bad idea. I think that this, and this could be added to it, and you could apply this, and therefore it might be better for you. But if we just throw the baby out with the bathwater, then it doesn't help very much.
Yeah, that helps no one. We get frustrated quite a lot, Tom, with certain Facebook groups that are designed to help coaches and personal trainers. And people post in these groups to look to get clarification and support. And people jump on these posts and say, nah, it's a load of shit, just do this. And it's like, that hasn't helped that person understand. All you've done is just created friction by resisting that person's viewpoint, and you haven't enabled a positive conversation for everyone to learn. So already people have left the conversation because they're thinking, well, if no one's going to talk like a normal, kind, humble human being here, then I'm out of here. Then you've created resistance from other people, and then the people that have made the comment are just sitting there all smug thinking, oh, this is the solution to the obesity crisis or the lack of information that this person is struggling with to help someone else. So, you know, we don't actually help anyone by just putting up a wall and saying, doing this. You don't actually empower anyone. You know, it's like, you know, do we fish for someone and, you know, give them a fish, or do we show them how to fish so that they can go and fish and feed their family? It's the same kind of analogies, and, you know, we need to be doing our part to support these conversations in a positive, progressive way.
Definitely. I mean, it kind of goes back to what I was saying about when we were talking about the obesity campaign from Cancer Research UK, and I was saying that sometimes a message does need to be delivered in a more sort of compassionate manner. Not necessarily this time, I'm still not sure on that, but in general, a message does need to be delivered in a manner that people are actually wanting to listen to. Mm-hmm. It's very easy, if you think someone is wrong, to shout them down, but you need to ask what the actual outcome of that conversation is that you want. Like, are you approaching this person because you want to help them change their mind? Or are you approaching this conversation because you want to show this person that you're right and they're wrong? Because if someone comes and asks you about something that you know is BS, but they're quite passionate about it, if you just shout them down, they will not change their mind. It's called the backlash effect, I believe, or it's something like the backlash effect or the backfire effect or something, whereby basically if someone holds a view and you plough them with facts, you would expect them to take those facts and change their mind, but what actually happens is they become more assured of their convictions. So, yeah, just slamming people down doesn't work. We need to sort of have conversations. The best thing to do whenever you're disagreeing with someone is to first find places where you actually agree, and then you can work from that position onwards. which is completely off topic, to be honest. But it's something that I do find very useful, especially in conversations online, which can often go down the shitter very quickly. If we approach conversations trying to find middle ground first, we can often get a far more productive outcome.
That is a beautiful point, to be fair, because if you just think about like almost a relationship. You get angry at someone, and then you maybe say something, and then that person says something back that is negative, that maybe they're angry about and haven't said anything. And what you do is you end up saying another comment and another comment, and you move further and further apart and never get to a resolution, rather than saying something and maybe someone just for a second not reacting emotionally, standing back and saying to yourself, okay, where's this person coming from? How are they feeling? Why have they said this? Let's understand. Let's find middle ground. Let's agree on something, and then let's move back towards that comment to discuss it and bring it closer to the middle. And you know, if we think about any environment where we're looking towards a resolution, the only way you can move forward is be able to create some kind of rapport. And Tom described it as find a middle ground. You create rapport, and then you move towards the conflict by slowly chipping away and finding out that actually you have an awful lot in common. Because sometimes in an argument it can feel like, oh, this guy's a dick and he doesn't believe what I believe and he's totally wrong, and you're 100% apart from each other. But actually you're probably 80, 90, 95% close to one another, but you're making the 5, 10, 15% seem like 100% because you're in an emotion of conflict and you've created that wall. So let's take down the wall, let's have positive conversations and discuss the nuances around it, and again we'll be moving far more positively forward and we'll be helping far more people.
Yeah, I often find as well that if you can define terms at the start of a conversation, it can be quite useful. Usually when people disagree online, or when they disagree in general, they actually agree pretty much on everything, but they might be arguing about 2 different points. So, for example, with the obesity campaign, people have argued that, as I said, that obesity doesn't cause cancer, and people have argued back and forth. But if someone actually takes the time to define what cause means in that context, then everyone will agree. It comes down to approaching the conversation and knowing what you want to get out of it at the end, and then actually trying to move towards that. If you're wanting to piss somebody off, you will have a very different conversation to if you want to end it productively, having changed someone's mind.
So I'm going to wrap up this show with the mission statement of our company, because I think it's prudent, and then I'm going to go and tell you how you can get some more cool free information if you'd like to. I also think it's important because I think there might be a good few people listening to this that haven't actually listened to the show before, because I get the feeling the show is going to get a bit of attention. So our company mission statement is to be the voice of reason in health and fitness and inspire life change on that journey. And I don't mind if that shift of change is career or health or body or mind or performance or recovery. For me, that's where what we do is important. We're creating a shift in people to move towards great change in their lives, for people to literally live a more awesome life. So if you want more information on health and nutrition as a result of today, then maybe wind back and go to podcast 117. Again, it's free, teaches you how to set up a diet. Episode 118 then talks about goal setting and getting into a bit more of a positive mindset. Then maybe scroll through some of the other episodes on this podcast and think, where am I at right now? What help do I feel I need? And maybe pick a few episodes that can just help you out with where you are on your journey right now. If you want some written information, there's 3 free ebooks at my website. Go to bencoomber.com. And you can get 3 free ebooks. One is on mindset and change, the other one is on nutrition, and the other one is setting up a gym program and getting going with that kind of stuff. All free and just information that you can use today. We write on an awful lot of these topics, so you can maybe go to Body Type Nutrition, which is our nutrition education company. We write on all sorts of stuff. We've written a couple of replies to this recent stuff on the Body Type Nutrition Facebook page. So that's episode 117 and 118 of the podcast. Then have a little look around. That's bencoomber.com. to get some free ebooks, and bodytypenutrition.co.uk, where we start to write a little bit of stuff. And again, there's some more free ebooks at Body Type Nutrition. There's information on our fat loss coaching, our nutrition education courses, loads of stuff. But if I can help you more from today, we will do that. Otherwise, me and Tom will shut up, because we've probably already been for recording for about an hour, and people are probably thinking, it must be snack time.
Yeah, we should probably leave people alone now.
Anyway, look, if you've enjoyed this show, if you've never listened before, do me a massive favour and leave a review on iTunes. It helps us immensely get this message out there. If you think someone else should listen to this, go and tag them in on social media, share the iTunes link with them. If you've got a reply or response to this, reach out to us on social media, give your comment, write an email into the show, bencoomber@gmail.com, subject line podcast. We're here to help, we will help. Also, if you've got a personal question you want to ask me, I am always available on social media. I might not always reply straight away, but however you like to talk, whether it's Instagram or Facebook, you can send me a message and I will help you as much as I can. It's my promise. Right, Tom, we'll go.
We'll go. Cheers for listening, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. And please share this around. Get the message out there. I think this has been a really positive conversation. And I will see you on the show next week. Oh, actually, you might see me on Monday. We are bringing a new thing to the show. We're now going to start doing 2 shows a week again. The second show will be a micro show. So it will be like 5-8 minutes long. And it will be something that maybe we've written about, or me and Tom are exploring on a personal level with our personal development. So it's really just something else to take away outside of kind of like the rambling conversations that we have. If you don't want to listen to those shows and you like these Q&A shows, then awesome. Just download these shows, pick and choose as you please. But it's just to let you know that these are coming, because I believe that me and Tom have more value to be able to help you people. So I'll actually see you on Monday, because I'm going to share with you my current personal development, what I'm doing on a personal level to take my body and mind to be more awesome, and hopefully you'll learn from that. Right, everyone, we are off. Have an awesome day. Goodbye.
Bye.
Hey everyone, Coomber Radio, episode number